The majority of Li Bai's poetic creations, 9 out of 10, have been lost to time, leaving us with a fraction of his original works today. At the Palace Museum, there's a remarkable calligraphy piece by Li Bai called Yangtai Temple, a treasured artifact donated by Zhang Boju. Li Bai's script in this work is exquisite. For those studying graphology, this piece suggests that Li Bai was a distinguished individual with notable appearance and exceptional charm. The Yangtai Temple reads, "Mountains are lofty, waters vast, myriad forms abound. Without the magic touch of a talented pen, how could such grand and beautiful scenery be fully depicted? On the 18th day, written on Yangtai Temple, by Li Bai." Li Bai was born in 701 AD, making his age easy to calculate. Where was he born? It was probably in the western regions, growing up in what is now Tokmok, Kyrgyzstan. He grew up in a place called Suyab village, which you can visit today. It's in a location called Tokmok in Kyrgyzstan. At around the age of 4, Li Bai relocated to Jiangyu, Sichuan. Hence, when we talk about Li Bai's hometown, we usually think of Jiangyu in Sichuan. Li Bai's father, Li Kai, was a wealthy merchant, but merchants held a low status at the time. Their social standing was so diminished that Li Bai couldn't participate in the imperial examinations. Both the offspring of peasants and officials could sit for the exams, but the children of merchants were not permitted to do so. Thus, Li Bai never had the chance to take the imperial exams throughout his life. Instead, he had to rely on an alternative route, recommendation. What is this recommendation process? It involves seeking endorsements from influential and powerful figures. Therefore, in the first half of his life, Li Bai devoted considerable effort to engaging in self-recommendation, where he would submit his written works and credentials to prominent individuals, hoping to secure an audience with them. If they were impressed during the interview, they might recommend him for a position. At the age of 10, Li Bai delved into the writings of Confucian scholars, mainly taught by his father, and he particularly enjoyed Zhuangzi. He also liked Zhaoming Wengshuan. Poetry was the most rapidly spreading art form at the time, so even though Li Bai never achieved official success, he was quickly famous, and his poems were widely sung. Li Bai consistently encountered fans, guaranteeing him a meal wherever he went, a fascinating facet of his life. In his teenage years, Li Bai immersed himself in swordsmanship at Kwangshan Daming Temple, where he resided for over a year. In 718, at the age of 17, Li Bai set out on his own. His departure was picturesque, with Li Bai leading the way and a young boy named Dan Shah trailing behind. Dan Shah led the horse as they journeyed far and wide. They arrived at Zizhou and traveled to Changping Mountain to meet a wise man named Zhao Rui. Who was Zhao Rui? You can still find a set of books called Long and Short Classics, also known as The Contradictory, authored by Zhao Rui. Zhao Rui was a hermit living with his wife in the mountains. Why was Li Bai so fascinated by him? Well, Zhao Rui had a remarkable ability. When he extended his hand, birds would come flying to him. He could have many birds perched on his arm, indicating what? It showed that he had cultivated a peaceful demeanor, devoid of any hostility, which allowed the birds to rest on him. This is why Li Bai felt compelled to learn from such a sage. He also gained the affection of Zhao Rui and his wife during his time there. In this place, Li Bai embraced the ambitious aspirations of strategists and the practices of Taoism. Surprisingly, Li Bai's idols were figures like Su Qin and Zhang Yi. Those who held the seals of the 6 states, were eloquent and went around resolving major issues. At the same time, he practiced many Taoist techniques, like alchemy, meditation, and breath control. Upon departing from Zhao Rui, Li Bai found himself capable of drawing birds to him, just as Zhao Rui could. This skill can indeed be learned. After completing his Taoist training, Li Bai descended the mountain and began his pursuit of official positions by self-recommendations. He first went to the largest city nearby, Chengdu, known as Yizhou back then, and then met with the governor of Yizhou, Su Ting. Su Ting was a local official with the power to recommend individuals for positions. Li Bai impressed Su Ting with his poetry, but Su Ting couldn't casually recommend someone. If the recommended person had issues, the recommender would be held responsible. After Li Bai left, Su Ting had him secretly observed. The results showed that Li Bai was constantly drinking, singing, and getting drunk. When drunk, he was talkative and loud. Su Ting decided not to recommend him as Li Bai's behavior was too unstable and risky. Even though Li Bai tried many times, his behavior made people think he was too trouble-prone. His talent and love for drinking made him dangerous in their eyes, so Su Ting decided against recommending him. Later, Li Bai found Chengdu unbearable, so he said, "Let's head to go Yuzhou, modern-day Chongqing. It's closer." In Yuzhou, he met the governor, Li Yong, who was a renowned scholar of the Tang dynasty. Li Bai wrote a poem for Li Yong. "There will come the day when the rock finally goes up with the wind, flying up to the highest sky." This famous line means that if given a chance, Li Bai could reach great heights. However, Li Yong also didn't recommend Li Bai, because Li Bai's attitude and demeanor didn't seem suitable for a stable official position. In 720, Li Bai came back to Jiangyu. He made the rounds, met several prominent figures, received some praise and recognition, and shared his poems, but unfortunately he didn't get any opportunities, so he went home. After returning home, Li Bai took a position as a minor official in the county office. Interestingly, some biographies of Li Bai don't mention this period, and his poetry collections rarely include poems from this time. Eventually, he couldn't continue as a small official. Li Bai wasn't cut out for such work. Later, Li Bai went back up the mountain and stayed at Daming Temple for 2 years. During his time there, he received a gift from his master Zhao Rui, a collection of poems by Chen Ziang. This collection was very helpful to Li Bai because Chen Ziang's poetry was groundbreaking at the time. For example, "Where before me are the ages that have gone, and where behind me are the coming generations? I think of heaven and earth without limit, without end, and I am all alone, and my tears fall down." Li Bai was particularly fond of Chen Ziang's style, which helped him develop his perspective on poetry. What is a poetic view? It's the ability to discern what makes a good poem. At that time, regulated poetry was popular, and if you didn't write it well, you wouldn't have much of a future in politics. However, the constraints of regulated poetry limited Li Bai's imagination. Li Bai believed good poetry should be as clear as the lotus emerging from the water, natural and unadorned, and the moon shining straight in without needing to be interpreted. He was especially fond of Chen Ziang's lament about the past and future, and he spent 2 years reading Chen Ziang's collection. After 2 years, Li Bai ventured out again. Although he came from a wealthy family, he couldn't just live off his inheritance. In 724, at the age of 23, Li Bai embarked on the path of poetry again to make a name for himself. It's quite poignant that after leaving Jiangyu, he never returned home. Even though his family, including his father and siblings, treated him well, he never went back. Carrying a hefty amount of money, Li Bai journeyed to Chengdu, now also called Chengdu, then made his way to Wanzhou, now also called Wanzhou, passed through the Three Gorges, and finally reached Jiangling, now called Jingzhou. In Jingzhou, he reunited with his close friend, Wu Jinan. Tragically, during a trip together, Wu Jinan suddenly fell gravely ill and passed away. Li Bai took charge of organizing and conducting the funeral and recorded the event, showing his deep loyalty to his friend. Even Confucius said that if someone died and no one took care of them, he would be responsible for their burial. Taking care of someone's funeral is a sign of deep friendship. On the day of the funeral, a tiger suddenly appeared. Perhaps the natural environment back then was more pristine, causing panic among the attendees. While others retreated in fear, Li Bai courageously stood his ground, brandishing his sword to fend off the tiger and protect his friend's remains. Later, Li Bai relocated Wu Jinan's grave to a safer location, as the original site was vulnerable to flooding. These actions exemplify Li Bai's genuine and compassionate nature towards his friends.